Cagayan de Oro, or officially City of Cagayan de Oro, are simply referred to as CDO, is the first-class, highly urbanized city in northern Mindanao. It is the capital of the province of Misamis Oriental, where it is geographically situated, but governed administratively independent from it. Of people inhabit the Philippine archipelago long before the 30th century. They spoke many different languages and dialects, worshipped spirits, and were grouped into a large variety of regional social structures. Each grouping was essentially independent, but when interaction did occur, so did war and conflicts. The primary causes of conflict were the same as those existing today: to grab land, resources, or anything else of economic value. Furthermore, each in-group disliked those who did not belong to their class, group, race, or who did not look or behave like them, or who did not have beliefs identical to theirs. The earliest Muslims to reach the Philippines were the Arab traders, who dominated the Red Sea Indian Ocean, South China Sea trade route from the 9th to the 11th centuries. They established their first foothold in Solo and frequented the Bongyo-China trade route via Solo, Palawan, and Mayay, or Mindoro. Muslim missionaries from Malacca and the Bongyo also arrived in Solo and Mindanao to reinforce Islam among its followers and convert the non-Muslim inhabitants. Graves and tombstones of Muslim colonies dating in the late 20th, early 14th century were found in the southern portion of the Sulu archipelago, indicating the Islam has been established in the area during the period. To be specific, the tomb of Tuhan Magbalo, a foreign missionary who did the 1310 AD, was found in Bod Dato Hulo. By 1500, Islam was established throughout Solo and with no central government to resist the northward push of the sultans. Islam easily spread and reached Manila by 1565. Islam was easily integrated into islands. Societies as the indigenous peoples were divided into barangays, or a group based upon kinship. And Muslims brought with them an organization political concept of territorial states ruled by rahas or sultans. The Muslim leaders exercised sovereignty over the village chiefs and eventually Arabic language. Writing, culture, and government became a way.
Good day, everyone. I am Irha Himpit, and my topic for today is about the Philippines under American rule. The history of the Philippines from 1898 to 1946 describes the period of the American colonization of the Philippines. It began with the outbreak of the Spanish-American War in April 1898, when the Philippines was still a colony of the Spanish East Indies, and concluded when the United States formally recognized the independence of the Republic of the Philippines on July 4, 1946. With the signing of the Treaty of Paris on December 10, 1898, Spain ceded the Philippines to the United States. thereby beginning the era of American colonization. The interim U.S. military government of the Philippine Islands experienced a period of great political turbulence characterized by the Philippine-American War. Under the Treaty of Paris, ending the Spanish-American War of 1896 to 1898, the U.S. paid $20 million to Spain in return for full possession of the Philippines, including Mindanao. Beginning in 1901, the military government was replaced by a civilian government, the Insular Government of the Philippine Islands, with William Howard Taft serving as its first Governor-General. Also, a series of insurgent governments that lacked significant international and diplomatic recognition existed between 1898 and 1904. Following the passage of the Philippine Independence Act in 1934, a Philippine presidential election was held in 1935. Manuel L. Quezon was elected and inaugurated second president of the Philippines on November 15, 1935. The insular government was dissolved and the Commonwealth of the Philippines, intended to be a transitional government in preparation for the country's full achievement of independence in 1946, was brought into existence. Laws imposed by the Americans during their colonization. Philippine Organic Act of 1902, also known as Philippine Bill of 1902, was the first organic law enacted by the U.S. Congress for the Philippines. It provided for the creation of Philippine Assembly and a bicameral legislature composed of a Philippine Commission Upper House and the Philippine Assembly Lower House, where the lawmaking power was vested. Like other constitutions, it also enumerated the Bill of Rights for the Filipinos and provided for the appointment of two non-voting Filipino resident commissioners of the Philippines that would represent the Philippines in the U.S. House of Representatives. Philippine Autonomy Act of 1916, also known as the Jones Law, amended the structure of the Philippine Commission Upper House and replaced it with the Senate, whose members were elected by the Filipino voters. Because of this, the Philippines' first elected national legislature came into being. A notable statement of this act was the explicit expression of the United States to grant the Philippines its independence as soon as a stable Philippine government would be established.
Good day everyone, most especially to you, Ma'am Eliza. By the way, I am Trishia Gildo from BTLEDHE1B, and this is my report about Americans in Mindanao. This is the continuation of Miss Irha Himpit's discussion. In 1898, the United States reigned over the Philippines after Spanish-American War. So what happened in the Spanish-American War? The US declared war against Spain for two reasons. America's support the ongoing struggle by Cubans and Filipinos against Spanish rule, and the mysterious explosion of the battleship USS Maine in Havana Harbor. Now, to end the war, the US and Spain had an agreement or kasunduan, which is the Treaty of Paris. Now, what is Treaty of Paris? Treaty of Paris, under it, Spain relinquished all claim of sovereignty over and title to Cuba, and also ceded Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines to the United States. The cession of the Philippines involved compensation of $20 million from the US to the Spain. So after that, the United States then successfully reigned over the Philippines. And during the regime, they imposed laws like Philippine Organic Act of 1902, or also known as Philippine Bill of 1902, and Philippine Autonomy Act of 1916, which is also known as Jones Law. They also initiated a policy designed to assimilate the Moro into the Philippine nation because they want to curb feudal practices of Muslims such as slave trading. Now, slave trading is already a thing even before the Spaniards came. So, as a result, As a result to the attempt of the Americans to alter the traditional ways of Moro, it resulted to rebellion because the Moros didn't want the foreigners or outsiders invade their culture. During 1901 to 1913, Moro wars broke out. They fought for religious rather than political reasons. And they were unconnected with those of the Filipino revolutionaries who conducted the Philippine-American War because the Filipino revolutionaries wanted independence for our country. Meanwhile, Moros fought for religious reasons. Sporadic fighting took place in 1901 and was renewed in the spring of 1903. American troops were attacked near Lake Lanao in the interior of Mindanao. The best known of the American Moro battles occurred in March 1906 at the top of Mount Daho on the island of Jolo. 600 Moro who had taken refuge inside a large volcanic crater were killed by troops under General Leonard Wood. No, many women and children were killed in that fight. Wood came under severe criticism in the US Congress because of that. He was later absolved of any wrongdoing by President Theodore Roosevelt. So it renewed hostilities occurred in September 1911 and June 1913. Fighting ceased after that, although Moro separatist movements continued into the 21st century. So the Americans continued the colonization program on Mindanao, and in 1930s, the US authorities encouraged Christians to migrate to the southern region of Mindanao, and in February 27, 1939, 62 pioneers became the first settlers in General Santos. Now, these settlers had a mission, which is to industrially cultivate Jensan's fertile expanse of land. And this caused the displacement and loss of livelihood resources not only to Muslims but also to the natives like the Bilaan tribe. So, the migrants were on the advantage side in legally securing lands. The migrants made it difficult for the indigenous people and Muslims to own their farmlands because they did not have land titles to prove their ownership. So, the migrant Christians usually won over land disputes that tremendously increased both their properties and their populations as years passed. So, the Americans used their power and control over property and land laws to let American corporations and Christian settlers take over native resources. So, they deprived the Moro sultanates in the west of self-governance and independence. There are also natives from Luzon and Visayas like Ilocanos, Cebuanos, and Ilonggos that streamed into Moro territories in the western and central portions of Mindanao. And these resulted in armed struggles. The natives, especially those who refused to convert to Christianity, became victims of land grabbing by the migrants who were promised vast and fertile lands by the government. So I just want to highlight this act that was enacted by Americans, which is the Tidings-McDuffie Act of 1934. On March 24, 1934, the United States passed the Tidings-McDuffie Act that allowed Filipino nations to have self-government. But this is just a 10-year transition period that was granted by this act so that us Filipinos could be prepared for self-government and full independence. So unlike the two acts like the Philippine Bill of 1902 and Jones Law, those acts were considered as constitution. Meanwhile, Tidings-McDuffie Act could not be considered as a constitution. So that's it. Thank you for listening. And once again, I am Trishia Gildo, and my partner is Miss Irha Himpit. And thank you for listening.
Good day everyone, my name is Crizzel Jacob and I'm going to discuss about the integration of the Philippine state. So I have researched a lot and I found this ASEAN briefing by Bob Shed. ASEAN, or the Association of the Southeast Asian Nations, was founded in 1967 to strengthen further and existing bonds of regional solidarity and cooperation. The Philippines was one of the founding member countries when ASEAN was set up in Jakarta, while the ASEAN Economic Community, or AEC, which was implemented in December 2015, has a primary purpose to create one of the largest single market economies in the world, facilitating the free movement of goods, services, and professionals between the 10 member states. As a result, the Philippines' relationship and interaction with ASEAN and its members is of key importance to the bloc. So, by the way, if you're asking what is the purpose of the ASEAN integration, the ASEAN Declaration states that the aims and purposes of associations are to accelerate the economic growth, social progress, and cultural development in the region through joint endeavors in the spirit of equality and partnership in order to strengthen the foundation of the prosperous and peaceful community. Next question is, what is the role of Philippines in ASEAN? So ASEAN is one of the cornerstones of the Philippines' foreign and trade policies. This is manifested in the Philippines' policy to promote a more peaceful, stable, and free Southeast Asia through the pursuit of different initiatives in the policy-making, economic, trading, and functional cooperation activities. So this may be the more frequent asked questions, and this will be the last question. So, what have the Philippines gained under ASEAN integration? Philippine prosperity. This is the answer. With the full integration of the ASEAN countries, investments, services, job skills, and the free market would enable the Philippines to have economic prosperity, and the benefits will eventually trickle down to the citizens' benefits. So that would be all, and thank you so much for listening. Again, this is Crizzel Jacob reporting about the integration of the Philippine state.
Integration to the Philippine state. The Philippines can be considered a country where successive governments have sought to create a single nation by implementing integration policies. In this article, two formal models are developed: the modernism model and the historicism, primordialism or essentialism model. To suitably analyze the national integration policy of the Philippines, the analysis revealed that the post-independence national integration policy of the Philippines cannot be regarded as a being successful. Second, national integration in the Philippines will be continue to be difficult. And also the third, no determined argument can be made regarding the relationship between mobilization and national cleavage. And the fourth, the modern nation should not be regarded as an extension of pre-modern ethnic group, but as a new identified group that is formed through the process of modernization. In addition, the mathematical implication of the two models are derived. The modernism model implies that the first, in some cases, a ruling group that is the majority at the time of independence can be maintained is the position even if it cannot assimilate a majority of the underlying people after independence. The second, in some cases, a ruling group that is not in the majority at the time of independence cannot attain a majority even if it is able to assimilate a majority of the underlying people after independence. And the third are larger rolling group is not always capable of promoting greater integration than a smaller one can. On the other hand, the historicism model implies that the size of the underlying ethnic groups that will be comprised the rolling group when mobilized is the key to the success or failure of national integration. That's all. Thank you.